Alright guys, I wanted to go through my thoughts on Shadowlands so far, what we're headed into, um, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I'd like to kind of end on a positive note, but I know that's subjective, um, and due to the way I want to lay out this video, it's kind of impossible to do that. So, the bottom line, I want that to come at the end so that hopefully everyone will listen to, the whole video and what I have to say and whatnot. So, yeah, it'll be interspersed there. So we'll start off with some good. Great job, Blizzard, with the zone art and new cosmetic types. I think the zones are beautiful and have a lot going for them. So the art team is just doing a great job as usual. I feel like they're really stepping up. New cosmetic types, like the back slot, your cloak, getting new, crystals and wings, kind of like Diablo-esque type wings. Very, very cool. I like that. And it gives people a reason to grind those reps that they may not want to grind otherwise. Like a lot of people are going to be grinding them regardless, but some of the casual players, that will give them a reason to reach certain ranks with those, factions where they otherwise might have ignored it, right? So cosmetic stuff, really cool. Great job, Blizz. Torghast. So Torghast, we're going to be spending a lot of time in there for various reasons, collecting reagents and stuff to craft our legendaries, conduits, a lot of things, gear in general. A lot of things are going to come out of Torghast, and that's a main focal point for Shadowlands. So with that being the case, it really needs to feel fun and engaging, and sustainable, right? So it needs to be fun for quite a while. And kind of like Visions, we went in there over and over and they weren't really engaging or fun to most players. I feel like everyone I've talked to, everyone I've seen videos or, Twitch streams that, did them over and over, like they just weren't fun, right? So I feel like Torghast has a lot of potential and it's really cool. It's a great concept, but it's really lacking in engaging combat, right? Is one of the big things. Like the floors it doesn't feel exciting when you go to the next floor, right? Because it's a lot of the same and there's very little density in most cases, which I feel like that needs to be worked out. Like I feel like we need more density, especially when we're getting a lot of those buffs, the anima powers and random buffs that you get and things like that. It could really help us deal with higher density, and that would make combat a little more exciting. The anima powers and stuff like that, it's a cool idea. I like it. But let us use those, in a fun and engaging way. But a lot of the mobs in there are pretty underwhelming, and the floors themselves aren't laid out very well. Like I said, low density, not much in the way of objectives. Like you'll talk to NPCs and then you'll help them find an item that they're missing, right? Like there's a fairy and you help them find their flute, or there's another guy, you help him find his weapon or things like that. And it's not particularly exciting, right? And all you get really at the end of that is generally another anima power. So there's a lot more risk for certain classes and not a whole lot of reward for any class, right? Because when you take on those side objectives like that, let's just take Rogue for example, because that's mainly what I focused on for the beta. It means that I'm going to have to get in combat with a lot more mobs that are already boring, just because those NPCs are following me around until I find whatever it is they're looking for. So that they're putting me in combat and making me fight things that I would otherwise ignore because the combat just isn't fun in there. You know, you'll get 3 or 4 mobs in a little pack, and you kill those and move on, and it's not very engaging. And so those side objectives, I feel like there needs to be more tied to them, higher risk and higher reward overall, because otherwise, to me, it's just a hindrance, right? Because I could stealth through the areas that aren't really going to give me much benefit, but when I take on those objectives, I can't really do that, you know? So yeah, make the combat more engaging and fun, make the side objectives and stuff more worth it, right? That's a big thing. And add density and flavor to the floors. And when you go up a floor, it should feel more exciting than the previous one, I feel like. You're ascending a tower, and all you're really doing is maybe gaining, or not gaining, you're fighting mobs that might have a little more health, or maybe you have another elite that you didn't have before, but it doesn't really feel much different. So yeah, there could definitely be a lot of work in there on that. And another point on Torghast, you know, the debuffs that you get. A lot of time, mobs will have things like oppressive aura that just reduce your haste by a large amount, especially when there's more of that mob type, like sentinels that just stack, and it just completely destroys an energy regen class like a rogue or a feral, or you know, a windwalker to a degree. So a lot of, you know, what they're thinking is challenge isn't really a challenge. It's just, you know, a flat debuff that's removing haste and not allowing your class to play the way it should. It feels really, really bad. You know, and all it is just being near that mob, right? So, and it's a large range, you know, so if you're in vicinity of that mob and you're fighting another pack, you're still getting that debuff while you're fighting the other pack, even if you're not fighting the sentinel. That's not challenge. That's just, you know, debilitating to your class for no real reason. Like, for me personally, I'd rather see them present challenge in having the mobs with more abilities that you have to counter in some way, dodging things, stuff like that. Like, to me, that's fun combat, but just, you know, a flat debuff that just kills your energy regen, and, you know, not to mention the mechanics of your class getting killed on energy regen, but your damage goes way down too. So it becomes all about attrition, right? And the mobs take so much longer to kill because it's killing the mechanics of your class and the ability to have enough, you know, sufficient regen to just kill the mob, you know, in a timely fashion. That's not challenge, you know. That's a really boring and lazy way of trying to present a challenge. You know, it really should be more about the mobs being interesting and countering their abilities, like I said before. So that really needs to change. Now, through some of the anima powers, like I said, or I've said before, you can gain haste and things like that here and there from anima powers, but you know, when you're getting 2 or 3 sentinels and all of a sudden you have 40% reduced haste, I mean, that's hard to overcome, you know, and it just makes your class feel so like blah to play, you know. So get rid of the passive stuff, you know what I mean? You can't rely on that for Torghast to be interesting, or any, you know, facet of the game to begin with. But since we're talking about Torghast, you can't rely on that. Like, be more creative with the mobs, you know, make them have more abilities and things to interact with and respond to. So yeah, I definitely had to mention that, because that's another thing in Torghast that makes the combat just feel like forced and just mundane and uninspiring, I think, is the bottom line there. It's really uninspiring to play. Improving those things. Legendaries are very cool. They have been for the longest time, and Legion, we saw the most of them, and we're getting a lot of that back, and they have really cool passive effects that make an ability a lot stronger, obviously. Not necessarily more fun in most cases, you know. It's just more about gaining power than it is actual fun, because you don't gain any new abilities really. You're gaining a lot of passives, and you know, some of that is tied to the fact that we have too many passives in the game to begin with, right? So take certain legendaries that give you the ability to choose 2 talents from the same row. Maybe you're running Deeper Stratagem already, and it allows you to take Vigor. Those are both passive things, and they're cool. Don't get me wrong, like the effects tied to them are cool and all, and they give you more power, but it's not a fun thing, right? It doesn't add any fun to the game. It just gives you extra energy regen, or the ability to have 6 combo points instead of 5. So yeah, the legendaries definitely make you more powerful, but I'd like to see things that actually add new abilities, you know, would make it a lot more fun, because the simple fact is we're not gaining anything in most cases for like the core rotational kit for classes and specs. We're not really gaining anything from most of them. In fact, some of them are losing stuff, which is definitely bad. So the legendaries, you know, and covenant abilities are kind of add that into this. You're gaining like 1 on-use covenant ability that's actually rotational or somewhat rotational. And the other one is generally tied to some sort of a defensive or a skip mechanism or something, you know, like Door of Shadows or Fleshcraft or whatever. Those are more defensive or allow you to skip certain things or teleport or whatever. So there's really the 1 rotational ability, like Serrated Bone Spike, Slaughter, Sepsis, things like that. You know, and Serrated Bone Spike has a pretty short cooldown, 30-second recharge, and you get 3 charges. You know, so being able to put a Bone Spike up on 3 different targets, and if one of them dies, you get refunded a charge. You put that up on yet another mob, so you have a bleed, you know, rolling on each of those targets, and you're getting charges refunded. That's pretty cool. But some of the other abilities, like Slaughter, for rogues, from Venthyr, all it really does, it functions exactly like Ambush. It has the same damage and everything, and the shadow damage actually replaces your deadly poison instead of augmenting and allowing for both. So you don't gain anything in either one of those scenarios, because The initial damage is basically ambush. The secondary part replaces your current deadly poison with a shadow version. So all you're really gaining there is 15% lifesteal from the poison, right? So not very exciting because it's replacing existing things already, and it's a cool idea to begin with, but it shouldn't be replacing those other things. It should be augmenting your rotation. So in the end, all you gain there is 15% lifesteal, which is, it's cool, but not particularly exciting. Another sepsis, it has a fairly long cooldown, a minute and a half, I think it is. It's a cool ability. It has some great synergy potential, but a minute and a half cooldown, so it doesn't add much rotationally to an already lacking rotation, and right now on beta, like, the cooldown when you kill a mob is reduced to 0. It's not actually supposed to be that way. It's supposed to reduce it by like 60 seconds, but it's actually just completely removing the cooldown. So it actually feels better now than it will in the final product. So you kind of get the point. Like, some of those abilities are either really nothing new and exciting, or the cooldown's too long to be a rotational thing. So the point I'm getting at is rotations from specs in Shadowlands are very, very lackluster. And combat is the core of the game, so for me that's really depressing because, I want more. I want to feel like I'm going forward and gaining stuff, gaining abilities that are fun, not just feel like I'm gaining nothing but a bunch of passive stuff that doesn't augment my gameplay, my combat as much. It just makes me more powerful, right? So that for me is a very, very big issue. Having said that, the one exception to all that, I would say, is Shadow Priest. I think Blizzard did a great job with, finally revamping Shadow Priest, because it definitely needed it. It was very boring to just always have Void Form up. You build up the sanity and, then you drain it, and then almost instantly you could just have it right back up. So it wasn't really a cooldown, right? So now Void Form has a 1.5 minute cooldown, so they can tune accordingly to that and make it more of an exciting and rewarding cooldown to press. Not to mention bringing Devouring Plague back and things like that. So Shadow got a revamp, so great job there, but pretty much all the other specs play like they did in Battle for Azeroth, or potentially even lost some things, and really all we're really gaining is returning spells, right? And those are mostly utility. Now that's a great thing, don't get me wrong. Like, getting a lot of those utility things back baseline is a great thing, but the bottom line for me is that rotationally most classes are really boring right now, and it's been that way for a while. Like, Legion had Legendaries, BFA had Corruption. A lot of that was passive. You would just get procs for Gushing Wounds or Twilight Dev or whatever. Like, it wasn't really, it didn't augment your rotation, make that fun to begin with. So for me, many, many less passives in the game and more like fun and engaging abilities to make combat cool. So rotationally, like, for me, it feels like all rotations. All specs should have like 6 consistent rotational buttons that they press, maybe up to 7 and 8. Like Windwalker, for example, feels really good. But, you know, a lot of classes, like Demon Hunter is a good example. It's very, very stripped down and basic. And it's just, maybe that's fun for some people. You know, they want a simple rotation because, you know, they're mythic rating or something, and they want to be able to focus on dodging mechanics and doing their job and things like that, right? But for me, the challenge, I would say, is being able to perform a full and somewhat complex rotation while doing those things, right? If you can do your full rotation well while still avoiding mechanics and doing mechanics properly and whatnot, like that's what I want to see, you know? So maybe a stripped down rotation is fun for some people, but it's definitely not for me. So I would like to see, you know, like I said, 6 to 8 buttons, rotational buttons. And for me, that means ranging from a 0 to 25-second cooldown for each of those abilities, right? That to me kind of defines a rotation. And any other buttons that you have that might be situational are kind of icing, right? So going back to Windwalker, spinning crane kick, that's always available if you have the chi, but it's really a situational ability, right? Do you have Dance of Chi-Ji proc, or do you have enough mobs to warrant using spinning crane kick? So that's kind of like icing. It's nice to have that extra button to choose when or when not to use it. But yeah, 6 to 8 buttons, I would say, with a 0 to 25-second cooldown, for me, it feels pretty good. And a lot of classes don't have that. So yeah, for me, that's the bottom line. And what scares me the most about heading into Shadowlands is that it's really stripped down and basic for no apparent reason. You know, I want to feel like we're moving forward in combat, and combat is starting to feel really lackluster. I mean, it has for quite a while for me personally, but I feel like it's just getting worse and worse. So, you know, the returning utility abilities and the Covenant ability that you get when you choose that, those things aren't enough to make up for a lackluster rotation, you know, because all those utility things you're not using rotationally, and so you may gain potentially 1 button from your covenant. And some, you know, specs already lost some stuff even from BFA, or maybe just it stayed the same, right? So yeah, I feel like, I don't know. I don't know if they're doing it because they're lacking passion. You know, maybe Blizzard is losing their passion. They definitely have the resources, right? Like the whole small indie company meme is a thing for a reason, because we know they have the resources and the ability to do whatever they want, but they're simply not doing it. Now, does that mean that they just want a really basic, stripped down game? I can't imagine that being the case, because they already have Diablo. I love Diablo, it's fun. Don't get me wrong, I'm not putting it down in any way, but why try to make this game into that, right? Really stripped down and basic. It's just not that kind of a game. You know, MMO-rpg as opposed to an action RPG with a limited action set, right? Completely different animals. So I don't feel like they should be trying to do that. You know, they already have that type of game, so stop trying to make WoW into that kind of a game. It's just not ever going to be that. And if it is, I think you're just going to lose your whole player base. Doing what I've done so far in beta, I was looking forward to Shadowlands, and for me right now, it's looking pretty grim, you know, all around. I'm still going to play it. I'm going to give it a shot because, you know, maybe there will be changes from now until then that will make everything I'm saying just completely negated. I doubt it, but it's possible, right? I think it would have showed up by now throughout alpha and beta if it were going to happen. So I think this is pretty much what we can expect, everything I'm talking about. Now, whether you would agree or disagree with that, cool. But from my perspective, you know, it's not really a negative thing. It's more just trying to be honest, right? And the honesty and the bottom line for me is it's too stripped down. You know, it's not fun to be in combat the way it used to be. So I really feel like that needs to change. And I think that a lot of people agree because, you know, WoW has lost a huge portion of their player base, you know, and some of that comes back in spikes, like when an expansion launches, because people come back, they haven't tried it, they think, okay, all this new stuff is going to be fun, and they come back maybe for a month and they're like, yeah, it's more of the same, or it's even worse, or whatever, and they leave. But I feel like the more this type of thing goes on, the less people are going to come back for good. So yeah, that's the bottom line for me, is rotations need to feel fun. We need more buttons to press like it used to be, and not such a stripped down gameplay all across the board. So yeah, I'll stop waffling about all that and get out of here, but let me know if you guys agree, disagree, are indifferent, whatever, and wouldn't mind having a discussion about it, you know, maybe a stream if people, you know, like to engage in that sort of conversation and, you know, see what ideas we can stir up. I'm all about it, but let me know what you guys think, and I'll get out of here. So I'll see you in the next one.